So our subject today is preventing burnout. And burnout it's a special type of job stress that's considered to be kind of a state of physical, mental, emotional exhaustion, also combined with kind of doubts about how competent you are or if your work is valuable. And it's commonly associated with the helping professions, like nursing, medicine, social work, teaching. What fields does everyone work in?
I'm a chef.
You're a chef.
I'm a student right now, but I also write and I'm a cashier as well.
Okay.
Software support. Human resources.
Okay, so we've got a nice variety here. Lorna, what about you? I realize I don't know what you do.
I work at the university. I do science. I'm a scientist.
Okay, great. And I know Sarah has a history with social work, and we've got our other Sarah here who teaches. We've got massage and more teaching, and so we've got a nice variety. And of course, Taechin back there who teaches nurses, along with teaching in general, teaching Dharma. So, why do you think that burnout, which is an interesting word in itself, would be more associated with the helping professions? Yeah, please come up, Taechin. Otherwise, I don't know if I can get my voice out to you. Yeah.
Hi, morning.
Welcome. If you don't mind me asking, what is your name?
My name is Greer.
Greer. My name is Wang Mo.
Thank you. Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you. And what kind of work do you do?
I'm a writer.
You're a writer. Okay. Continuing the spectrum here. So we were just talking about burnout, and I had just asked the group, why do you think burnout is specifically or more considered more prevalent in the helping professions? Any ideas?
Well, you have to try and practice being empathetic when really you're more drawn to being sympathetic to people's situations.
Yeah, so ideally you want to be empathetic, but I think the tendency is to be a little bit more sympathetic. And what happens when we're being sympathetic? What happens in our body? What do you...
Emotionally taxing.
Emotionally taxing.
So physically, because you tend to take on the person's affect. So if they're slumped, you're going to slump too.
You tend to match them, yeah. And when we do that, it's interesting because we're trying to be compassionate, but it becomes about ourselves and about our own distress, our own personal distress. So we kind of see the connection between stress, distress. So, Taechin.
Well, I think a lot of societies, and certainly many of our families, gave a strong message. If you really loved me, you'd worry about me.
Mm-hmm.
And so in order to show care and compassion, we have this unconscious belief that in order to be compassionate to this person who's suffering, we have to suffer along with them, which is extremely draining.
Yeah, this is a really common dynamic that occurs in our society, that if we care about someone, we're going to suffer. And I think it's also common in Christianity that there's this connection between compassion and suffering. But if we're suffering, especially if it becomes a chronic, ongoing, daily source of stress, we basically become someone who can't be compassionate or can't help people. So it becomes detrimental.
Also, we're taught that it's better to give than receive, and so we start to forget to check how our energy is doing and just keep putting out until we don't have anything.
Yeah, that we kind of give and give and give, and aren't so mindful about our personal health and well-being, and then we're not able to. So we, in effect, get to that place of burnout.
I think, to echo what both of you had said, it's generational. I was brought up in a small family business. We all worked. You worked hard. You worked every day, regardless, of how you felt. And it was a community. It was a bakery, and so we had to give to the customers that helpful smile every morning with coffee and donuts. And I think being grown up with that for 22 years, it's ingrained into you. You work, you get up, you show up, and you're there every single day. And I think of my own biological family, we all still do it. So it's very ingrained at a very young age. By a parent.
Yeah, that's interesting too that you mentioned that it's a generational thing. I was just contemplating whether burnout is becoming more prevalent, or maybe it was just, what's changed that burnout is becoming more prevalent? Is it that we're just recognizing it more often, or we're actually doing something differently? But, Pema.
I think the speed of I think the speed of what we're doing is increasing and increasing and increasing, and I think there's less space. I don't know how to say.
Yeah.
I think it has a stressful impact, and there's less space for recovery when difficult things happen.
So that's actually an interesting point, that it's not only these dynamics about compassion and suffering. It's the speed of society and those time pressures and the expectations, as well as lack of time for really rest.
What Pema said just reminded me that in the hospice training we just had 3 days ago, 2 days ago, however many days it's been, Rinpoche was saying that we each have our own ideal speed at which we operate, and it could be different for your mental speed or your physical speed or whatever, your ideal speed. And if you feel pressured to work faster, you're actually less efficient. And so the exercise to find what is my ideal speed and then resist the pressure to operate at a different speed would be hard, but a good skill to learn.
Thank you for sharing that, Taichin. It's actually a really interesting thing that we all learned. We recently came off retreat and some training for hospice volunteer work, as well as end-of-life care. And our teacher, Rinpoche, had introduced the idea that there's an ideal or natural speed that we all operate best at, that we feel comfortable at, and also that we're most efficient at. And for many people, we are operating at a speed faster than that ideal speed. So she encouraged us to try to determine what that ideal speed is. So we would walk and we'd say, how do I feel? And if you're feeling anxious or nervous, you're exceeding that natural speed. So that's actually, I think, a really important part, because in our society, the idea or the encouragement or idea, I think, is to go fast as possible, be most efficient, multitask. And now I think we're finding more and more that it's not so efficient. I know Sarah or Lakpakipu wanted to add something as well.
I think partly we have a greater understanding these days of emotional health and emotional intelligence and concepts like how much work we can handle or can't handle. And so I think that it's not that burnout didn't exist before, but rather we have a much greater understanding of the unhealthy nature of things like stress and distress, emotional distress in particular. And so I think people who maybe burned out in the past would just switch careers and nobody talked about it.
Yeah, or kind of go off into the wilderness. And
right.
Yeah, I do agree with you there.
I think there are some other causes too. Speed is a good one. the speed you're expected to work, but in my area, it's just constant. I would be expected to work all day and then put in extra time because, you know, of course I need to publish, do the work. And then, of course, I need to dig up my own money because I'm on soft money. So it's really more like a 24/7 kind of job. Professional jobs are expected to work around the clock, really, which is so unrealistic. There's no time for the mind to decompress. So, you know, when the soft money goes away, it's actually a blessing in my case. It was a blessing when my soft money went away. But you know, and then there's another kind of burnout, as long as I'm talking, and that's, you know, things haven't gotten worse. I think things have gotten better in some ways. My brother was born in 1960 with a mental handicap, a very significant mental handicap. And I think I was burned out as a kid, always defending him. And it was much worse then than it is now. People are far more understanding, and they're so much less harsh. I mean, I was always defending him. Even professionals were professionals. You know, there were so-called psychologists and social workers, would they accused the mothers of being refrigerator mothers. So it was just across society to look at children with these problems that we didn't understand as, you know, it was our fault as family members for someone like my brother to have such a, to be so different. So, you know, there's all kinds, it's not just job related.
Yeah, oh yeah. It can definitely be a huge family, or I'm thinking like family life, and just day-to-day activities can contribute to burnout as well. And there was something you said that I was going to comment on. The blame, that if we feel that it's our responsibility to provide something, and our responsibility is kind of being handed down, and we kind of lack that control, that can be a huge factor in developing burnout as well. Any other thoughts?
I forgot the question, Mama. There's been so many good
Yeah. Well, first we were talking about why might burnout be more commonly seen in helping professions. And then I think we might have jumped into what has changed between, because we were talking about the generational lessons that were learned and what's changed between then and now. But I think we can move on as well. And let's see, okay, one more thing.
I did a talk by Richard Davidson a couple years ago, and he was saying that there's a common misperception that burnout is compassion fatigue. He says there's actually no such thing as compassion fatigue. It's empathy fatigue. I can't remember exactly, I can't remember more than that I used to remember what he said the problem with empathy fatigue was and what the difference is between compassion and empathy. But it was a very strong message. There's real compassion, you can't get fatigue. But if you mistake compassion and empathy, you can.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up as well, that more recently we're hearing burnout be referred to as compassion fatigue. And I don't know where that has come from, but there are very, very different levels of compassion. There's sympathy, empathy, which really aren't true compassion. And then there's higher levels of compassion where basically compassion is the wish that others not suffer, as well as having that urge to end the suffering of others. So that's very different than really matching the suffering of another, thinking that we're being compassionate.
I think that, unless I'm much mistaken, that the idea of compassion fatigue is sort of coming out of things like secondary PTSD, which like family members of returning vets would have some really traumatic experiences and get secondary PTSD from living with somebody who's traumatized.
I see.
So I think the idea sort of came from that and generalized more to people who like work in trauma-related fields, getting things like, sometimes they call it caregivers fatigue, or
Therapists can get it too.
yeah, by taking on the trauma of your clients, you get sort of a person may
secondary.
develop some sort of trauma as well, and so there's a lot of interesting work in the fields of trauma stewardship and so forth.
But my understanding is the main point is that there's a difference between compassion and
Right.
sympathy and empathy.
Yeah.
Sympathy and empathy really being based on taking on or resonating or vibrating or feeling the difficulty in a way that potentially incapacitates us from being able to help.
Correct.
And compassion being something different than that, that's based on the wish to help free others from suffering.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know more than that at this point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, compassion fatigue. The other thought I was going to say is that, is it possible that this term of compassion fatigue has developed because some of the professions, the helping professions, do have a strong aspect of compassion. And even so much that there's this kind of, our teacher has brought up the idea of this unidentifiable quality of care that we're supposed to meet. But it's not really defined. We don't really know what we're expected to provide. Like, I'm a nurse, so I'm going to speak from that perspective. But nurses have their specific activities, giving medication, treatments. But more so than that, there's this idea that nurses provide care or compassion or patience. So many of these other states of mind and services. So I think there's a relationship between this care and the idea of compassion fatigue. I think similarly with teaching that I had the opportunity to teach nursing students for a semester, and the teaching was the easy part. It was the counseling, surrogate mothering, and all those other things that were a lot harder. So I think there's also a lot of other things that people in many professions are expected to provide that we're not really aware of.
I think maybe one of the other sources of the idea of compassion fatigue is that as someone is approaching and enters burnout, they are very aware of the fact their compassion feels like it's gone.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be easy to make that tie between, I must have compassion fatigue because I don't feel it anymore.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That could be.
Yeah, I mean, your examples are caregivers that I can think of. Just think of customer service.
Yeah.
You said you were a chef, but the servers especially.
Oh, yeah.
Although you serve the servers, so if somebody doesn't like their food, I'm sure it gets back to you.
Yeah, definitely.
But I can see that in any way, shape, or form that we're serving others, that this would be the case.
Mm-hmm.
There's always something, and especially I have to say in Madison, in terms of the restaurant example, where, there are more restaurants per capita in Madison than almost any city in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
or at least it was at some point. So if you don't like it, if you don't like the service or the food, you can just go somewhere else. And so people, in terms of restaurants in Madison, people feel very entitled to have this quality of care and quality
Customer service.
that, that may be a little beyond what people normally expect, and even in a restaurant. And it's that same unspoken, like it wasn't in the job description.
But it's expected. Yeah. Yeah. Your thoughts? Okay. So a lot of ideas here, but did you want to add something? No. Okay. So this unidentifiable quality of care or unspoken expectations also can play a role in burnout. It's difficult to what was I going to say? The train left without me. So I think I was just going to say something like it's hard to meet expectations when they're not defined, when it's not in the job description, that can contribute to developing burnout. I think there's also another factor that I was thinking about is while we were on retreat, our teacher Rinpoche mentioned that compassion isn't intended to be a long-term dynamic. So when our compassion fails, then what's underneath that tends to be things like impatience, anger. So when our compassion isn't there, then we start feeling like, okay, it's this person's fault that my compassion isn't here, and we can get into dynamics of blaming the person we're caring for, blaming the institution that we're working for, becoming angry with those individuals, becoming impatient, which anger and impatience are like cousins. So what can we, this is getting a little into something else, but when our compassion or our compassion, our sympathy or empathy leaves us, then we end up in a more dysfunctional state of mind. And she introduced the idea that perhaps rather than thinking we need to have compassion there, we need to have patience, which is a little bit of a different position to be.
What occurs to me also would be a fallback position for compassion is loving kindness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because we can maintain loving kindness without the deep, energetic investment, which is, I didn't intend to do an ad for their loving kindness series book.
That's all right. I was going to get there down the road anyway. So you brought up the idea of loving kindness. Do you want to share what the difference between compassion and loving kindness is, Taekchun?
Well, number one, the loving kindness meditation that is taught is wonderful because it helps you in the privacy of your own home and mind practice the dynamic or the mental state of loving kindness under different circumstances, with yourself, with dear ones, with neutral people, with challenging people, so that it becomes habitual and you can draw on it under pressure. But also, you can, if you think about it, even a difficult situation, if you kind of pull back a little and calm down a little, you can be kind to someone without agreeing with them, without matching their energy, without matching their state of mind, and without resisting them, without like pushing them away because they're annoying. Mm-hmm. You can just relax into being kind, which is easier if you practice the state of mind. But then it doesn't take your energy, and it doesn't stimulate their escalation.
Okay, so it sounds like you're specifically speaking more about the practice of loving kindness rather than what the difference between loving kindness and compassion is in itself.
Compassion is a more, I think there's more mental energy that goes into compassion. It's a more trained state of mind. And as Rinpoche said, it wasn't meant, it's not the tool that was meant to be taken out of your toolbox all the time. It's a specialty tool. Then loving kindness would be your everyday tool.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Taekchun.
So what's the difference?
You almost have to feel it.
I think there's a higher level of engagement with compassion than with loving kindness, because loving kindness, even in the way that you talked about it, was like you take a step back a little bit from the person that you're practicing it with. So you're seeing almost the person as an object of your loving kindness as opposed to the person right in front of you. Perhaps I might be wrong, but
I think that there's something about not being as energetically
present.
well, I wouldn't even say you're not present, but it's in a different way.
Yeah.
A softer, less charged, energetic. So that it doesn't really, you know,
Well, I kind of felt what you were saying, but I think when I'm feeling compassionate, I'm feeling myself through their eyes and feeling, you know, completely in their body, viewing the world from them, from their view, and, you know, absorbing that and, you know, really getting in there. Whereas with loving kindness, I am, you know, in my own self, just throwing love from my heart at them, and it's, you know, easier for me to do the second kind. But they're both really good though.
Yeah, and it sounds like from what you're saying, when you're feeling yourself in that other person, that sounds like that's the empathy you're experiencing.
Exactly, yes.
Whereas with loving kindness, it's more of your boundaries are more there, and you're feeling love. One thought I have, and loving kindness, I think, is an interesting word because it's mixing concepts. Kindness is often considered to be applied compassion, but loving kindness to me feels more of a dynamic of love and seeing that other one as dear, and that you're interacting with them because they're dear. Just like you, they wish to be happy and be free of suffering. You know, just like us, they're a human being and they're dear. Did you want to add something, Pema?
Well, I'm thinking of the traditional prayer, the four great wishes, and how sometimes we associate loving kindness and compassion with two lines of that prayer. The first one is, may all beings experience happiness and the cause of happiness, and the other one is, may they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So compassion is the wish for those to be free from suffering.
Yeah.
Loving kindness is associated with the other one. So if you actually make those two wishes and just practice making those two wishes, there's a different feel between wishing someone to be free of suffering and wishing them happiness.
Yeah.
And so like that, you know, even if we don't precisely define it, because everyone experiences it a little bit differently, even though we can give definitions. But that practical experience is going to be a little different, but if you wish those two wishes, then you can start to feel the difference, and then you can start to explore the difference between loving kindness and compassion.
Yeah. It's a good source of cogitation.
You know what I was thinking is that for those who've been mothers, there will inevitably come a time when the 2 or 3 year old kid is frustrated, unhappy, wants something they can't have, and you say no. And they're like, Mommy, I hate you! No mother in her right mind actually believes that. She knows that this 2 or 3 year old kid doesn't hate her, it's just misbehaving because they're overwhelmed in whatever way they're overwhelmed. For a mother to actually believe the child hates her would be insane.
Yeah.
In a way, we need to take that attitude toward challenging situations. Like, we're the mother and we understand this 3-year-old kid who is so dear to us is simply overwhelmed beyond their capacity to deal with it. But not take it personally because they don't really mean it. They don't even know what it means.
Yeah. So looking at it from the perspective.
The preschool teacher's going, yeah.
Burnout? You betcha. They really do. There's a sense, I can echo off what you just said, there is a sense of, and I had to learn that because I taught kindergarten, and you go even lower, their compassion level, they just love you. They just love you. And they say it, they look at you, you can see it in their eyes, and when they, you know, I had to learn quite fast, when they look at me and say, Miss Sarah, I don't like you anymore, I would take it very personally, even though I've never had a child. And it would get me. I would cry, my heart would go faster, I'd get anxiety, and I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? What did I do? Because I tend to be a very loving, kind person. And so I just learned that it's okay to it's a soft way of almost, I hate the word discipline, but it's a soft way of discipline and telling myself, they don't hate you, Sarah. They don't know.
They don't have any idea what that means. They're just overwhelmed. They're not getting their way and they're overwhelmed. It's totally not about you.
It isn't. I learned that. I did, and I really did. It was a tough one for me to learn. And it isn't about me. It's them and learning. I mean, learning that this is life.
There really are. It's easy to see them as dear. They really are dear in all their struggles. They really are. It's not even hard.
Yeah, it's a great example about, they don't know. And this applies to adults too, that when someone is coming off as angry, we tend to take it personal, but really they're not even looking at you. They're just upset. And you just happen to be the unfortunate person in front of them or on the phone. But actually, it's a lot easier on the phone because you're that much far removed. You're just a voice on the other end of the receiver.
Let's tell if you're their nurse.
Yes, I have discovered this. I do a lot of telephone triage work, so. But looking at other beings as, again, wanting to be happy, not wanting to suffer, and they're suffering, and they're reacting in a specific way because they're suffering. Another way that I've looked at it is that, if your mother was, had a mental disorder and was walking, in a dangerous area and perhaps near the edge of a cliff, how would your reaction be? You wouldn't be upset at her. You'd be like, oh, please come away from danger. She's not in her right. She's not thinking clearly. She doesn't have all of her mental faculties present. You'd want to pull her away from danger. So in some ways, I often think of other individuals as not really having all their mental faculties. In some ways, they're insane. They're not thinking clearly. And I think it's a lot easier to think of that one as dear and when you look at it from the perspective that they're not in their right mind. Or as in the case of a young child, that they're reacting. They don't have any filters. And many of us, when we get angry, we don't have any filters. Our filters are gone. So, all right. So I think I don't want to talk so much about the signs of burnout because I think it's pretty much out there that we know what the signs are. But just briefly, some of the signs are, we'll let the truck go past. Just feeling anger at requests, feeling exhaustion, not wanting to go to work, being afraid to go to work, not enjoying the work you do, not feeling valued, cynicism. There could be physical symptoms, headaches, insomnia, sleeping too much, weight loss. Really, it could be a whole plethora of symptoms, palpitations, shortness of breath. And you don't have to have all these symptoms to be in a place of burnout. There's a kind of a recognition that you're in this kind of downward spiral. And there can also be alternations between anger and depression, that anger is the energy is going up and depression the energy is going down, and this can be cyclical. Our teacher Rinpoche has given us a kind of an interesting exercise that we can do to see if we are supported in work that we're doing. And in burnout, you can feel that the environment that you're working in doesn't support you. So if we think about that, about the environment that we're working in, the work that we're doing, and then, close your eyes and just put your hand out in front of you. And you can just feel if you might feel like a little bit of a resistance, like a cushion of energy. And kind of feel where your support is. So if we feel our hand drop down, that might be your energetic system, saying that there isn't much support for the work you're doing. And if it's up high, there may be a lot of support there. So this is something that you can kind of play with, that where is the support for the work you're doing. And you can even bring your hand up high and then bring it down and feel where is that resistance, where do you feel that little bit of cushion. And while you're doing it, just keep in mind the work you're doing, and whether that's teaching or nursing or working as a chef. And we can do this with other areas of our life as well. So if you find that your hand is going down, or you're not feeling that resistance, it may just be that you don't have as much of the energetic sensitivity, but it could also mean that perhaps you might be either in a place of burnout or moving in that direction, and there may need to be some changes, or it might be a good idea. You don't need to do anything, but it may be a good idea to consider some changes in your life or in your work. Does anyone want to share their experience?
I'm not totally clear, actually. So I'm sensing the job that I'm doing, and then what am I doing with my hand?
You're feeling the energetic support
You're coming
of the
from
environment.
Finding where your cushion is.
Like this?
Soften
Yeah.
your hands.
Okay. Oh, okay.
You want to support.
Okay, so try it with something else.
Yeah, that's
Try it with a
football?
different. No, seriously, try it with two different roles so you feel the difference.
Okay, football. I can't do football. It's not even.
Well, no, I mean like your hands might go.
yeah. Or maybe do your previous job.
Consulting. Business consulting.
Bring your hands down till you feel the cushion.
Okay. All right, I have to pick something like, I don't know.
Coffee shop in it.
There we go. Barista. Okay, yeah. I feel the difference.
Until you feel the difference, it's hard to do that exercise. But you definitely start way above where you think it's going to be, so you can feel when you hit it.
Feel when you hit the point.
There is this cushion.
There is, yeah. And if this isn't something you've done before, another way that you can kind of identify the feeling you're looking for is just bring your hands together and kind of feel, do you feel anything? Most people will feel, most people will feel a little bit of, like there's almost like a ball or a balloon between your hands. And that's kind of that energetic feeling. So that's what you should feel when you're bringing your hand down, that kind of sensation. And we're getting into the world of energy and weirdness. Go ahead, take
Talk about the world of energy weirdness. My minor chair was Lee Seeker's in the Department of Psychology, and he was a natural skeptic. He was an open-minded skeptic, but he was a skeptic. And he was so good at research methodology. They brought him into NIH to teach their researchers how to improve their methods. Okay, so this guy was brilliant. And I was in this group, and I happened to be the only nurse that was over there, and everyone else was a psychology student. And he'd been reading the Skeptic magazine out of Colorado, and they really lambasted like therapeutic touch and energy healing, etc. So he's talking about it, and he looks right at me. He had no idea. I mean, I'm a student. He had no idea I was involved in it. He says, "Why are nurses so gullible for this stuff?" I'm like,
Maybe because it works.
I gave him all that exercise to build up the energy and feel it, and he's doing it, and he's kind of like, he felt it, and he's shocked. And the whole rest of the discussion was, okay, if this stuff is real, how would you guys, and this was a group for the analysis of data, how would you design valid, reliable research to test it? And did Brilliant Me write down any of those notes? No. I thought I'd remember them, but the idea is even skeptics can get it as long as they have an open mind.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry to take you off
That's
track,
okay.
but
That's
yeah. If he can get it, anybody can.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for clarifying. All right, so, so preventing burnout. It's interesting because a lot of these things are common sense principles, and I'm going to gloss over those a little bit because they are common sense, but there are some things that we can do, drawing on both Buddhism and kind of techniques that have been a little bit more secularized from Buddhism in order to bring us back to a more careful place, a more balanced place. So relaxation, taking time to rest and relax after work, leaving work at work, which can be very challenging for some of us. Getting enough sleep, exercise, those things are, common sense. They're just difficult for us to sometimes work into our schedules or to address. But I want to talk about some meditation techniques that we can do to just keep us healthy. And some of these are simple. There's a variety of them. So if you don't like one, you may like another. But first, I want to address mindfulness meditation practice is very well studied. It's a little bit far removed from religion. So if you feel like, I don't want to do something that's religious or spiritual, it's been taken out of that context. But it still has benefits. And there's actually been a lot of interesting research done on mindfulness meditation practice, as well as other meditations. Last night I was just perusing the internet, and at UW-Madison there's the Center for Investigating Healthy Minds. And they've done a lot of research on meditation and also well-being. And they've found that well-being is actually a skill that we can learn, we can practice. It's not something that's, just a product of our external environment. It's something that we can enhance with training. So it's interesting because it puts the responsibility in our court. It makes us not just a victim or a victim of our day-to-day activity. It's something we can do. It's something we can do actively. And they actually did an interesting study where they texted people on smartphones and asked them 3 questions. They asked them what they were doing right now, where their mind was, if it was focused on what they were doing or elsewhere, and how happy or unhappy they were. And they found that, I think it was about 47% of the time, individuals reported that they weren't paying attention to what they were doing. And when they weren't present to what they were doing, they tended to be less happy than those who were present to what they were doing. So being distracted, or I'm going to add in here multitasking, has a cost. It reduces our well-being. So if we're doing something, if we're just doing that activity, we're going to be more happy. We're going to have a greater sense of well-being. And I think it's so common now to be doing something and then thinking about something else. So we're at work, but we're thinking about maybe our family member or what we're going to do when we get home. If we can just do what we're doing, if we can just be present, it'll be healthier for us. And also we'll be more efficient. Pema.
I really love this point because I come from the business, my background is in business and in improving businesses. And I was shocked to learn that multitasking is actually incredibly inefficient. And just from an efficiency perspective, not even from a well-being perspective, but if you think about it from just actually machinery perspective, they have these big machines that can make squares or circles. And in order to switch from making a square to a circle, you have to change parts in the machine, right? So they call it switchover time, the time it takes to switch from making one part to another part. And we actually have that in our minds, too. We have switchover effects of switching over from one thing to another in our minds. So if we're constantly thinking about a couple of different things, in our own minds, whether it's just daydreaming while we're doing something or not, that's still multitasking. And we're switching back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And that's very inefficient as well as affecting your well-being, as you're saying.
That's a very interesting point. Thank you for sharing that. Actually, it caused me to think of something that when I was in graduate school, one of my professors told me as I think I was doing some kind of work for a big project, and it was just taking me incredibly a long amount of time. And she told me that the energy of inertia is greater than the energy of motion, which basically means it takes a lot longer to get going than to keep going. So every time we stop, it's going to take us a lot longer to get going again. So, and it was just a good reminder to just work on what I was doing and not to go and check Facebook or go and check my email, go and do this and then keep jumping back and forth. So if we're, on the phone with a customer or we're, teaching the preschoolers, if we can just do that and not go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, it'll reduce this unhappiness and lack of well-being and stress, and consequently the risk of burnout. So this presence and attending to what you're doing is the first technique, and it's not, people say it's not a meditation, but it's a kind of a technique or a change in how we hold ourselves and hold our mind. And in some ways, meditation really is just changing our state of mind. So if we're being present, that's a form of meditation. Another really simple meditation activity is just for 5 minutes being aware of your breath. Or you could either be aware of the sensation of the breath coming out of your nostrils. You could be aware of your belly, going in and out, just for 5 minutes. And if your mind wanders, which it does, which it will, you just bring it back to the breathing, to keeping your awareness on the breathing. And we're not gonna do this right now just because we have a limited amount of time. Actually, how long do we go?
Till a quarter after.
Okay, so then we still have 15 minutes. It's okay. And I want to get to the loving kindness part. So this is one. Personally, and meditation, I consider meditation to be like tools. Different tools for different activities. It's also very individual. Some people like mindfulness practice. Some people really do not like it. So finding what works for you is very important. Another meditation technique that you can do is a walking meditation. And again, this is something that you can work into your day very easily. If you have a 15-minute break, go outside and go for a walk. And while you're walking, just be present and aware of the movements in your body, maybe the wind on the side of your face, the sun on your head, just being present and aware. Another thing you can do, again, during your day, if you have 5 minutes, or what I would tell people if you don't have any privacy is go to the bathroom. You will have privacy in the bathroom. I guess unless you have kids crawling underneath the stall or something. Sarah might. And just sit and be aware of, again, your body. Even you can just start at your head and just do a scan through your body and notice if there's any tension, any sensations. And if there's tension, you can just relax. Or you can even do, some people like to do a little bit of tense and relax. Starting at your head, you could tense all the muscles in your face and your head and then relax them. If you're prone to headaches, don't do this. And just gently go through your body and tense and relax the muscles. Now we come to something that's another meditation that's near and dear to my heart, which is meditation on compassion or loving kindness. And this is just a really scaled down version. It's not the longer version that's covered in our loving kindness series, which was where I was going to put the plug in. And I think that starts in a few weeks if you're interested in exploring this kind of meditation further. But this brief little practice is just to sit comfortably and reflect on the fact that just as you wish to be happy and free of suffering, so too do others. Others have that same wish as well. And then bring to mind a loved one or someone you care about who might be having a difficult time, who might be experiencing some suffering. And as you're visualizing this person or bringing this person to mind, hold that aspiration that they be relieved of their suffering and that they be happy. And while you're doing that, you can even mentally or out loud repeat, "May you be happy and have the causes of happiness. May you be free of suffering and the causes of suffering." And you can just take a few minutes to do that. May you be happy and have the cause of happiness. May you be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. And in the extended loving kindness meditations, you can bring to mind, a stranger, a person that you might be having challenges with. But for now, we're just going to stick with a loved one because that'll be the simplest person to perform this meditation for. And you can also do this meditation in your daily life. If you're in a situation where there are people around you, literally anywhere, in the school, at work, on the bus, in the airport, you can just notice the people around you and just wish that they be happy and free of suffering. No, they don't even have to know you're meditating. I think often we don't meditate because we think we don't have time, but these little meditations there's always time for, and it can have a profound effect on your state of mind. There's also, if you're interested in this form of meditation, I mentioned there's the Loving Kindness series that we'll be starting in a few weeks. But there's also, if you go to the website for the Center for Investigating Healthy Minds, which I think is investigatinghealthyminds.org, there is an audio file as well as a transcript of a longer meditation. I think it's about 30 minutes. And I think you have to put your email address and your name in and your zip code, and then they let you download it. But it's a really nice, easy, approachable meditation on compassion and loving kindness, and it's the one that they're using in their research. So other things that we can do to prevent burnout are, again, these meditation techniques, but also just letting go of things like fear of not being valuable, not meeting expectations, not getting enough money or status. Letting go of that fear can be really important. And also learning more and practicing a correct compassion, and also I'm going to add patience. Trying to really root out impatience in your life, noticing when you're being impatient. And we have a tendency to think we're being patient if we're being quiet and not interrupting someone. But meanwhile, our mind's going, da, 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 da. So we're not really patient. We're experiencing impatience, where we think that just by not saying it, it's not happening. But really, it's happening, and likely that other person knows it, because it's apparent on your face and the energy that you're experiencing. So I'm not sure when we're doing hospice training again here, but the hospice training that's offered through Grand Transitions, through our teachers' work, focuses on identifying impatience in your life and really trying to develop a kind of almost a disgust or revulsion for it, so you can reduce and eliminate it. And then after that's calmed down, you can develop patience. If you are experiencing burnout, the best thing is going to be, and of course there's levels of burnout. You might be just a little bit of burnout, or there could be on the other spectrum, you could be pretty far gone. So it depends on where you are on the spectrum. If you're just feeling a little bit of burned out, taking some time to rest, even a weekend, and eliminating stress. However you need to do that. If your family is a source of stress, get in the car and go somewhere else. And for the weekend, eliminate stress. If you're still feeling tired at the end of the weekend, you probably are experiencing some degree of burnout. And then I've seen other suggestions say, if you're at that point, you need a vacation. You need a couple weeks away from stress. If you're still stressed out and exhausted and experiencing physical symptoms at that point, you do have a serious problem, and it would be best to seek some professional help, seeing a therapist, and taking time off work, because continuing to work in that state is going to be harmful for yourself, and it's going to be harmful for others as well. But if you're in, if you're having a little bit of burnout, a little bit of exhaustion with your work, I don't want to say a little bit, but if you're in a less severe form of that, trying to identify and manage stressors in your work is going to be really important. And you can do some journaling, you can talk with other people. If you have like an employee assistance program, that can be helpful as well. But really you need to identify what's really fueling those feelings of burnout and stress and distress. And also on the other side of that, working with yourself, because it's not just the external that's a factor, it's what's going on in our minds and our bodies. So if we've kind of become cynical at work, try and consider ways to improve your attitude. Kind of rediscover what's enjoyable in your work and why you're doing it. If there's nothing enjoyable in your work, then it's time to find a new job. But for a lot of people, there was some reason they went into that field or that job. There was something enjoyable there, and trying to find that again is important. Another strategy could be working on gratitude, having gratitude for something, whether it's recognizing coworkers for work that they're doing, or feeling grateful for something else in your life. It could be something in your family life, your home life, but cultivating a mind of gratitude can be very important in your state of being. Pema?
I really like this one, and I had a tendency to underestimate it for a long time. But we have nonviolent communication or compassionate communication twice a month here. And the facilitator is Mary Kay Reineman, and she said she actually went to a company and taught who was having a very difficult time, and she taught nonviolent communication, and she opened with a gratitude round, or closed with one, I'm not sure. She went back 6 weeks later, and she said the business was transformed. And she said, oh, well, how did it go? This whole NPC thing. And they said, we didn't really do it. Actually, we didn't do any of it. And then they said, oh, wait, we did one thing. We liked the gratitude round, and we start all our meetings with it. And it was the only thing, even out of other options that they had to make changes, it was the only change that Mary Kay could discover that they actually made in that 6 weeks, including things that weren't related to nonviolent communication. And so I started to really think about that, and I have seen it work for people who are very depressed, and on medication and working with a psychologist, and I have seen it actually be the one factor that changed in their lives, and then their life changed. And I was pretty surprised to see that. So I think people have, I'm sorry for making such a long comment, but I think people have a tendency to underestimate. And I'm not saying it's going to help with everything, but I think people really underestimate this one. And starting your day with just 3 things you're grateful for every day can be really transformative.
Thank you for sharing that, Pema. Yeah, I have a tendency to agree with you. I've noticed that in myself, I've also looked at gratitude. I don't want to do gratitude. It really can be very powerful in changing your state of mind, because really to feel grateful, to feel gratitude, you do have to change. You have to shift. You have to get out of that, whatever state of mind you're in, and move over to this other one. And I know Taekchun has shared stories about how she's used a gratitude round with her nursing students, and that they found it very transformative, and the staff and everyone.
And it was like 10 weeks, twice a week. They'd say one thing they were grateful for. So it was really only 2 things a week for 10 weeks. It made a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Also, and one thing is not going to work for everything. It's not going to be a universal panacea, and it may be different for each person, what works for them. But a combination of things can also be, like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Taking short breaks during the day can be important. Doing these little meditation techniques during that time can be important to kind of reset your mind, bring you back to a more healthy state of mind. Leave your work at work. When you're done at the end of the day, if you can, do something Do something enjoyable. Do something that'll be energizing for you and act as a reset. Take Jen.
One thing that occurs to me now that you mention that is the exercise room for gave us in Peru about mental generosity. If you're at work and you're feeling burned out, you don't even say things, but you look at someone, whether it's your client or your boss or your coworker, and in your mind, I wish you well. I wish you have all your needs met. You just think it. You don't even say anything.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also hugely transformative. Probably would be as transformative as the gratitude.
Oh yeah, so mental generosity. Yeah.
Well, I think it's hard. I'm sorry. I think it's
okay.
hard to at first to understand that one, but because oftentimes we feel harmed by the person who's in front of us. But if they had all of their needs met, they wouldn't be harming anyone. I mean, they wouldn't be in negative states of mind or harming anyone. So a lot of times we think we want to have compassion for the people that we know who are kind to us. But it's also very beneficial if the people who are not kind to us were actually healed and had everything that they needed. Because from the perspective of making that wish, and the person who's wishing it means they would have no need to be negative or harmful in any form or fashion because they would have all their needs met. And so it becomes a very safe wish to make.
Thank you for sharing that, Pema. That is a very good point. And it brings up the idea of that everyone is just trying to meet their needs, in whatever dysfunctional way they might be doing it. They're trying to meet some need. So, having compassion or loving kindness for those who are the most angry, dysfunctional, whatever, can be hugely beneficial. Sarah.
A very easy thing at Gilda's house when I was going through my cancer that we did is we took a simple pot and we were told for a period of 10 weeks, every morning wake up and a little piece of paper, write something you're grateful for and put it in a pot. And at the end of 10 weeks, we brought the pot to the workshop and we planted all those pieces of paper along with marigold seeds, whatever you wanted.
Oh.
And then all of a sudden, these flowers come out of all these things that you're grateful for. And it was so simple, but it's so powerful.
Wow.
Because every
Yeah.
morning you're like, oh, here comes something I'm grateful for. And it's this beautiful bouquet of flowers.
Oh.
What an easy thing to do. Others did just the opposite. Things that they were angry about cancer. Could be angry about a divorce, angry about whatever. You write them down, you put them up, you put them in the bottom of the plant, you put your seeds in, and watch a beautiful thing come out of it. So we did a variation on theme of all of that, and it was just so cool to take something home and watch that happen. I thought, that's beautiful.
That's beautiful. And it was a great reminder as well, I
It was.
imagine.
Every time a new flower came up, I was like, okay, we let that one go. That's a good thing. So I had 2 pots going at one time, and it was just so fun, easy.
Thank you for sharing that, Sarah. That's a beautiful exercise. All right. So I think. I just want to cover a few things. We're kind of at the end of our time, but some signs that you might be feeling better after experiencing burnout would be your energy returning, having more energy, feeling more compassionate, being able to control your emotional responses, not being as reactive. One of the main signs of burnout is really that anything that someone asks of you, however small, you feel irritation or anger. So not having that experience, and really being able to think about the needs of others rather than just what's going on in yourself. Not being afraid to go to work, feeling joy again. And again, this is just feeling better. Some signs of a full recovery from burnout would be really feeling confident that you can really do the work that you signed up for. Thinking about other beings. You can even feel something rise up and say, but really that this is something I can do. I feel confident and I feel ready to help. I feel ready to, do what needs to be done and to help these other individuals. But if you've had that experience of burnout, it's really important to treat yourself differently, to not subject yourself to stress and to this personal distress and matching the dysfunctional energy of others, like in this kind of misguided attempt to be compassionate, to really not apply these kind of unreasonable stresses on yourself, just because it's just so harmful to yourself and to others, I'm going to say, because really you might be the first person, but everyone else out there is going to be the next person that's going to be the unfortunate victims of your anger and irritation and impatience and burnout. I think that's it. Anyone else want to add anything? All right, I think that's a good place to conclude then. So we're just going to do a short dedication prayer. I don't think it's on the cards, is it? So if you don't know it, just kind of go into your heart and follow along, I'm going to say. May my capacity for compassion be infinite. I dedicate these efforts to complete and total enlightenment so that I may be of benefit to all sentient beings. May it be so.